Project. So nice to be with you all tonight. Thank you so much for taking space to join. It's really amazing. You know, we just decided to pull this space together a couple of days ago, and already there's so many of us on this call. So thanks for making time tonight. I just wanted to start off really briefly with like some quick housekeeping things. If you are new to Zoom, just wanted to make sure you know how to use Zoom so you can fully participate. So a couple of things to note. You can find a little telephone icon that's your mute and unmute button. If you're on the computer, it's typically at the bottom of your screen. Sometimes if you're on an iPad, it's on the side of your screen. If you don't mind keeping yourself muted when you're not sharing, that will just help us make sure we can all hear whoever's speaking at the time. Please feel free to leave your videos on, even if you're cooking dinner or your dog is in your lap or your kiddos are coming and going. We love all of that. And it's just, you know, part of our new virtual world. So please feel free, we don't mind that at all. Also, if you are wanting to be able to see everybody's faces and you can only see mine right now, there's a little button that allows you to change the view from gallery view to speaker view. It's typically in the top right corner. It looks like a bunch of little squares in a grid, or else one big square. So if you're wanting to switch back and forth from being able to see whoever is speaking or being able to see everyone's faces who's on the call, which is also lovely in Moments too. You can kind of toggle back and forth. If you're on the phone, you can hit *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And please feel free in the time when we open up the call to just conversation. No need to, you know, be able to raise hands or things like that. Please feel free to unmute yourself and share in that way. If it gets a little wild and chaotic and tons of folks are talking, then we'll figure it out. But otherwise, please feel free to just come off mute and share and speak up in that way. Okay, holy hell, what a week. So as we get going and come into this space together, I just wanted to take a second, invite you all, please feel free to throw your name, where you're coming from, into the chat box, greet folks that way. Would love to see everybody shouting out where you're joining us from tonight. And we are about to use our brains for this conversation. And before we do, just wanted to give it an invitation to our bodies and bringing our full selves and an opportunity for us to really fully arrive. This is such a wildly intense time for all of our nervous systems. I know I'm feeling a lot of emotion actually rise up, just like seeing all your faces and being in this space right now with you is really, really wonderful. So I want to just invite you, if you're comfortable, to take a sec, put a hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. You can close your eyes if you want. You can take a couple of deep breaths if you want, but just feel whatever is there for you. Maybe you're grieving, maybe you're numb, maybe you're happy, maybe you're revved up and ready to go, maybe you're scared. So your whole just wild and wonderful self is welcome here in this space with all of us. And so just wanted to say welcome, and you can come back to this space at any moment if you need to in the call too, if you're feeling overwhelmed. None of us will judge you if we see you with your eyes closed or your hand on your heart, right, y'all? So also feel free to take those moments whenever you need to throughout our time together tonight. Awesome. Before we move even further and kind of further grounding us in this call, I want to open the space to Pam Reese, fabulous organizer out of Echo, Oregon, and one of our board members, who is going to share a poem with us. Pam, I am turning it to you.
Thank you. All right, let me get my screen up here. So this is a poem by William Stafford, the late Poet Laureate of Oregon. I believe he was the first Poet Laureate of Oregon. And this title is A Ritual to Read to Each Other. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade, holding each elephant's tail, but if one wanders, the circuits won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs, but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep.
Thank you so much for that, Pam. Awesome. Well, further, it's sort of just grounding us in our kind of the context and why we're here, and running over kind of what our plan is for the evening for being together tonight. Just really wanted to start with that we are winning and really just take a minute to let that sink in, like really let it sink in. Do y'all feel it in your bones? Like, we are winning, and we have had such colossal victories lately, and it is not a coincidence that the insurrection in DC was on the same day that we saw victories in Georgia, on the same day as the Electoral College counts. And so much of this is obviously thanks to the powerful Black-led community organizing that is getting us here to this moment. And I see faces on this call, I know, who have, we're doing tons of work around our presidential election victory and making calls in Georgia. So just want to celebrate and appreciate you all as well, and the roles all of us are playing in those wins. And also, just naming that the attempted white supremacist coup and protest in Salem, in the protest that happened in Salem, it's meant to make us feel threatened and marginalized and like we're losing. And the reality is that they're happening because we actually are powerful and we are winning. And we're going to continue creating together and finding power with each other around the vision that we have for human dignity and justice for all, and the reality that we're creating. If we were in person, I'd say turn to your neighbor, but since we're on screens, we obviously can't do that. So if you would just find someone to make eye contact, I'm quote unquoting that because I realize it's kind of hard to make eye contact with the little square on your screen, but just like choose a square on your screen and make eye contact with that person. And on the count of 3, I want you to tell that person that we're winning. So we're going to go on the count of 3, we're winning. Are you all ready? Okay, choose your person, make your eye contact. 1, 2, 3. We're winning.
Winning.
All right, one more time. If you're on mute, unmute yourself for a second so we can all hear you. I should have prepped with that. All right, we're doing it again. Find your person. You ready? 1, 2, 3.
We're
winning. Awesome. Thanks.
Hannah, you got muted there.
Perfect. Thanks. Sorry about that. So quick agenda rundown. We really wanted to have this call to gather, to regroup, to remember that we're not alone and we're really held in a web of care with each other, and to practice and explore what it means to create spaces for our rage and our grief and our power and sharing strategies. And we know that this type of far-right insurrection and militia takeover isn't new in Oregon. We've experienced that in various parts of the state. We have folks on this call, I know, who are in those counties who have been a part of the organizing when that's happened, including folks from Harney, who I know are going to speak some to that history and context. I don't know if we've got any Josephine County folks or others on the call as well tonight too. This insurrection and political moment is also a huge opportunity for our organizing. And, this incoming presidential administration, and we have the opportunity now to really be thinking about, what it means to be moving forward this big vision that we have, the roadmap to a thriving rural Oregon. I don't know about y'all, but I know I have family members who voted for Trump who are, starting to disavow Trump and are having openings for, the first time in a long time. And I'm suspecting I'm not the only one on this call who's in that place. So where are we seeing places to move folks, our neighbors and our friends and our families? Where are we seeing opportunities for big organizing coming ahead? And wanted to take space to really dig into some of those questions together. So I mentioned the Roadmap to a Thriving Rural Oregon, so I'll ask Abby to pull that up for just a second, and I just wanted to run over that with you all. This is going to look familiar to a lot of folks on the call because this has been a co-created tool. Perfect. Thank you, Abby. So the Roadmap to a Thriving Rural Oregon, for those of you who haven't seen this before, is something that we've been putting together really since the pandemic hit. We started pulling folks together on strategy sessions just like this one to really dig into what our communities need, not just to survive this crisis, but to be thriving for the long haul. And how do we take care of each other through mutual aid projects and meet each other's needs without losing sight of the fact that this is a moment that we have to push big for the things that we want. And so out of that came hundreds of conversations with group leaders and, sending versions of this roadmap out for feedback and folks being like, this is missing. And it's an ongoing conversation. Please let us know what else you think needs to be in our roadmap. But we put together a few different categories that I'll just read out super quickly to make sure for folks on the phone, everyone can see this. This is also available on our website at rop.org/roadmap. So the main categories that we have so far on here, starting with We Are All Essential, is healthy and accessible learning environments for all children, universal basic income and a living wage for all workers, free childcare for all, and safe housing, childcare, schools, and workplaces. Mike, you're seeing this for the first time. Thanks, Mike. I love it. Healthy people make healthy communities is the next category on the roadmap. And when I say category knowing all of these things are connected, right? And like all of our work on all of these things is interrelated. So those are in some ways, of course, false lines. COVID testing, tracing, and treatment sites, also vaccine distribution as something that needs to be added to this. We made this before vaccines were really starting to roll out, although obviously most of our rural communities aren't actually seeing effective rollout yet. Releasing people held in unsafe conditions is another one. Also healthcare for everyone. That includes mental health care, sustainable local food production, and healthy food, clean air, and clean water for all. Next up, we have safe and welcoming communities, and that includes safety from state violence, investing in rural Oregon for the long haul, all of the things that we need to make this vision a reality, affordable housing and utilities for all, inclusive democracy, forgiving rent and mortgages, and ending detention and deportation, and providing permanent protections and dignity for immigrants. Also, we have connecting our voices, which includes fully funded United States Postal Service, publicly funded community media, celebrating rural Oregon's mosaic of experiences, and broadband internet for all. And so we really wanted to share this and make sure that for folks who are new to this, you had seen this tool. We're really using that as a framing we invited in some folks who are going to open our call and share for a few minutes around strategies and exciting visions and experimental organizing that they're currently doing around different parts of the roadmap to get our juices flowing around what it is that we're asking for, how we're organizing big, how we're really taking the opportunities that this moment provides. So we'll be hearing from some folks, and then we'll be, like I said, opening the call up to everyone to be able to share what are you seeing in your communities, what are you working on, and to be able to really just sort of identify together what is needed in our network right now and what our priorities are. Sweet, okay, let's see, what did I miss? Last quick thing, we just wanted to name that we know that safety and security concerns are coming up for a lot of folks around our network right now as a major priority. We know, that especially this weekend might be another hot time of, actions around the insurrection and Salem and in local communities as well. So if you are feeling concerned about threats, safety concerns for your group in your organizing, please reach out to us. We'd love to support you. Our network had to develop, unfortunately, a lot of tools over time around safety and security and how we keep each other as safe as we can. We also have some tools available at rop.org/resources. And Abby, if you wouldn't mind throwing that in the chat box as well for folks. We also have some resources there available already too, including a recording of a webinar that we did around best practices for safety and security for organizers, and a questionnaire to really guide you through safety planning around individuals who are being threatened. So check those out, holler at us, please let us know how we can support you. We can also chat some more about what you all are seeing, of course, again, when we open it up to the big group conversation. Okay, enough from me. We're so happy to be with you all. I am now, oh, one other quick thing, I'm sorry, I wanted to name is just that we're recording this call and we will be sharing it out with you all afterwards. And please feel free to share it with your networks and folks who couldn't make it with us tonight. All right, truly it from me. Emma, handing it over to you.
Thanks, Hannah. So we have a list of some really exciting folks who are doing incredible work in their communities. And we wanted to kick it off with Isabel from Rural Alliance for Diversity in Harney County, if this is a good time for you. I didn't tell you you were going first, but based on the context that we're seeing in DC these past few weeks, we really wanted to start with you who have seen firsthand what an insurrectionist movement and violent takeover can look like and how that can affect your community. And you're still going, you're doing such good work around racial justice. So really excited to get to hear from you for about 3 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me. So, you know, all of us, I think, in rural Oregon have had interactions with far-right groups, whether it's militias or, you know, less obviously violent groups such as Timber Unity. But here in Harney County, obviously, we experienced the Bundy brothers and their crowd. And they were here for, we always hear about 40 days. So in January and into February 2016, they occupied the refuge for 40 days. However, they had arrived in town in October, and I personally started hearing some of the stuff they were doing, intimidating the sheriff and other actions they were taking. I first heard about it about mid-November 2015. So it was, you know, 40 days, but really longer than 40 days. And then, so when it was all done and over, it was, you know, a coincidence that their acquittal happened. I can't remember exactly, but it was around October 28th, 2016. So, you know, less than a week before Trump was elected. And so the whole time Trump was the candidate, and we would, you know, it became more and more clear that he was going to be win the primary, but his violent rhetoric had began, you know, previously. And so it felt for me, and I think for others here in Harney County, it felt like those two events, the acquittal of Ammon Bundy and others in the who had occupied the refuge, and the election of Trump were two events that were closely related. And so when the insurrection happened in DC on the 6th, for me and my husband and I were watching it on TV. He's working from home because of COVID-19. And it was really eerie to notice, and I don't know exactly how to frame it, but it was the demeanor of the insurrectionists that was so similar to that of the occupiers here in 2016. So that attitude that they are right, and therefore they could comfortably bash a door in and walk into a building and assume that there will be no consequences. And there pretty much wasn't. I mean, they believe it because it's true, sadly, right? So they walk in there, and some of the police, Capitol Police, are taking selfies with them. And, you know, and we kind of had that in Harney County in 2016, not here, luckily, in Harney County, but actually because the sheriff of Grant County was supporting the occupiers. So there was, you know, all that. And it, in a way, it feels like those were the bookends of the Trump era, right? The occupation for us here in Harney County, and then watching the insurrection in DC on the 6th, luckily from from our living rooms, not live. But so there's that aspect of, you know, the Trump years when Trump won, I said, now Bundy has won too, and I said I cannot live in Harney County following, Biden, Bundy being acquitted and Trump winning, because I knew Trump was very popular here, and actually he gained popularity. He got higher vote margin this time than in 2016 in Harney County. And so, that's one aspect of it, fighting, going through 2 elections, working hard with the Harney County Democrats, and then making phone calls to Georgia to, in the election, and then for the runoff. So it was really hard, and it's hard to feel like it's a victory, although it is. However, at the same time, something else happened in Harney County. We created a new group, and it followed our first protest that Janelle and I, kind of at the same time, we had this idea to have a Black Lives Matter protest early on. I think we were the first Black Lives Matter protest in Eastern Oregon this time. I think it was at the end of May 31st or something like that. And so out of that initial protest, we created the Rural Alliance for Diversity, a group of us, and we started meeting regularly, and we organized other protests, and we had a Juneteenth march, and mostly Janelle and Teresa organized the first Pride event ever in Harney County in June. And so we continued to meet, and then we began thinking of longer term projects. And one of the projects we are working on is to have tombstones made for 2 unmarked graves at our local cemetery, which are for a couple who were Black ranchers here in Harney County at the first half of the 20th century, who had, and the wife, and Martha Anderson, was also a published writer. She wrote a book about Black pioneers of Eastern Oregon. And we raised funds, we purchased a copy of the book and donated it to our local library. And we also are going to set up a mini library in which we will stock with books that promote racial justice and social justice and equality and diversity, which education for which is lacking in this county to a certain degree. So
thank you so much, Isabel. Really appreciate that. We got just a few more minutes of Maru's time, so we want to jump from the vigilante violence of sorts that we're seeing right now to targeted state violence and the way that folks are pushing back and really making moves to end detention and deportation in the Pacific Northwest, but also all across the country.
Thank you. Apologies, we have a meeting at 7, so I only have less than 2 minutes to speak. Argentina, a member of our leadership, is also here present. So thank you for the invitation. We have made a lot of changes in Resistencia. One of them is that the entire leadership of Resistencia is now formed by people with experience of the system, either that are in deportation proceedings, that were detained, they have relatives detained or deported. So now when you see our leadership, you're really talking to people that have the experience of the system. As I speak today, we have 10 people on hunger strike right now. Hunger strikes have not stopped since last year, since the beginning of COVID. We have also more COVID, of course, more cases of COVID. And so that's why people continue on hunger strike. Retaliation has worsened. And so their decision to go on hunger strike shows you how committed people are to be released and to ask for the release of everybody. I'm glad that the winning in Georgia was mentioned, because as a founding member of Mi Gente, I'm really proud of what Mi Gente did in Georgia. And it shows you what it takes. I mean, I was really lucky to see the development of GLAR into electoral politics and how they knock every single Latino door in Georgia, every one of them. And it was a lot of work. and it was necessary. And we have a visionary in Mi Gente, Marisa Franco, that saw the need for us to jump onto electoral politics while we continue fighting the local fights that we have. So as of today, we continue supporting people on hunger strikes. Of course, we continue asking for the release of everybody in detention. But we remind you to keep pressuring Biden, transitional team, and very soon Biden as a president, to ensure that not only we get a moratorium on all deportations in his first 100 days, we also want a moratorium on all enforcement. And we want to begin a path to not only citizenship, because, you know, the papers don't guarantee anything. This is about undoing all the harm. So we are asking for an investigation of ICE and Homeland Security so we can build a process for abolishing the entire Immigration Customs Enforcement institution. So we introduced a bill last week here in our state. Is HB 1090, and even if you don't live here, but if you happen to come here sometime, do send a message to our legislators. I'll send all the information to Hannah. If you have relatives in Washington, please reach out to the Public Safety Committee so they can pass this bill out of committee as soon as possible. And by the end of this session, we can prohibit all private for-profit prisons, which will mean for NWDC that they won't be able to renew our contract in 2025 with the feds. And hopefully by 2025, ICE is no more also. And apologies for leaving. We have to start our other meeting. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining. Really appreciate you. That's awesome. Yeah, and one of the pieces that La Resistencia has been doing really incredible work around that Maru didn't mention is storytelling in their social media about people in detention and all sorts of storytelling around the organizing that's going on. And our next guest, Giselle Halfmoon, is going to talk. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just add one really quick thing, which is that for folks also who might not know, the relationship, you know, Maru was mentioning being based in Washington, but the Northwest Detention Center is our closest ICE facility here in Oregon as well. So like our folks, our neighbors and family members and friends who get detained out of our communities are largely ending up in Northwest Detention Center. So that work, even though that detention center is located in Washington, is really a big part of our, you know, work in terms of sort of what place do we feel responsible for in terms of shutting down sites that are detaining folks. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that in too in case folks didn't have context for Northwest Detention Center.
Absolutely, appreciate that. So our next person is Giselle Halfmoon, who is also doing another form of storytelling and has spent almost 2 decades building up KCUW, Umatilla Reservation Community Radio. And so this is one of the pieces of the roadmap going back to that, building up publicly funded community media across the state. And KCUW is funded by the tribal government and run through that system. And so we can learn from this existing and flourishing model to bring to other communities as well. So Giselle, are you in a place where you can share?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Yeah, just to talk briefly about our history of our station and our it's community operated, of course, and we are funded by our tribe, but we are mostly funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which of course has the mission to provide agency for, you know, diversity and educational programming, high quality content for everybody. So our station, we basically build it around community volunteers who come in and provide their own programming, and that varies from, you know, veteran shows, addiction, recovery, activism, and we're very proud to share messages from local organizers like Brianna Spencer, who's on the call here today. And basically, it's just trying to empower grassroots movements in Eastern Oregon. You know, unlike mainstream commercial radio, we get to dictate our messaging, so that's very important. And that is mainly because of where our funding comes from, like you said, from our tribe, from underwriters like the Rural Organizing Project. We're very thankful for you guys to be one of our newest and latest underwriters, so that's exciting. What else? Yeah, we started in 2004. Just our leader back then for public affairs, Deb Croswell, saw a need for a new type of media to communicate messages to our tribal community. We are a low power FM station, so we only operate on 100 watts, which is, you know, a range of maybe 20 miles circumference from the Umatilla Indian Reservation. It's a little spotty in some places. We're looking to revamp our streaming so we can get back on the worldwide network soon. Other than that, we just hope to remain to be a solid, sturdy tool for grassroots activists to share information that mainstream media, of course, won't or censors. We want to place emphasis on information as it pertains to the local community rather than the global audience. And more information, we're online at kcwradio.org, but basically that's about it. If anybody has any questions for me, I'd love to answer those.
Thanks for sharing. This is actually a time when the FCC is opening up licenses for people to start new radio stations, particularly east of the mountains. There's a lot of opportunity there. So if anyone's has their dream, we have some folks we could connect you with to make that happen. And there's also a lot of powerful community stations around the state that we're getting to work with and are always eager to get connected and are doing some awesome work.
Great. I'll leave my contact information in the chat box. I'd love to talk to anybody. So that's exciting.
Yeah. Okay, so from media to schools, another really big piece of our communities that are under the spotlight during this pandemic. Ken Vellante has agreed to share a little bit about what he has been digging into with the teachers unions, tackling workplace safety, and also organizing around some school board races.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, thanks for everybody for being here. My head's spinning and I'm writing down things and I'm getting stuff from the notes. I'm really excited about the things that I'm hearing and I want to thank everybody for their work. It's deeply meaningful to me. My name's Ken Vellante. I work for OEA. I'm based in Albany, Oregon. So I work primarily with Albany, Lebanon school districts. With about 1,500 employees, about half and half teachers, and the other half education support professionals, educational assistants, food service workers, bus drivers, etc. I just wanted to mention the easiest thing is just a few comments that I'm going to make. I know that discussion is probably more important around schools as we go forward. I am honestly and humbly saying that I don't have authoritative answers on anything because my strategy about what to do about schools, vaccination, and my members from yesterday changed from yesterday to this afternoon. So nothing's authoritative what I'm saying. Just the context for what schools are right now. Schools are our last, it's kind of like the last wall in the public sector a lot of times. Access to universal education for students. If a student shows up at the door, unlike private and voucher schools, they can't be turned away for who they are. Public schools accept all students in. And in our country right now, particularly in a lot of rural areas, but overall, free and reduced lunch students make up more than half of students nationwide. So, when it comes to food insecurity and access to food, schools are vitally important. When it comes to maybe coming in contact with a nurse or other social services that might be necessary, schools are very important. And I just want to mention a couple things about what's going on with schools right now. There's, about reopening or not reopening. On Tuesday, there's going to be an additional announcement that comes from the Department of Education around metrics around which school would be permissible or advisable. Some of you may know that those metrics prior to a couple weeks ago were binding, meaning that a school district couldn't open if those metrics weren't met. The situation's changed a little bit by saying that those metrics are advisory. And then now some school districts are balking at opening because of concerns about insurance liability if the metrics are just off and they don't comply with them. So it's very much a fluid situation. It's also a situation where organizing is difficult amongst members because they're honestly of two different ilks. Teachers want to be running into the buildings to protect their kids, to help them, to teach them, to make sure they're okay. At the same point, they have deep concerns about their own health and safety. So it's very much at flux right now. One more additional comment with regarding schools, school boards. I've worked as OEA political organizer in the past for a couple years, and I've worked districts all around the state, school funding, bonds and levies, and school boards. School board races for us in my world and working for OEA, we are always looking for teacher voices or employee voices on these boards. What we have a lot of times that individuals are elected to boards and they haven't seen us inside of a schoolroom for 40 years. They haven't seen what kids are in the schoolroom right now. They don't see how big the classes are. So we're always looking for teacher voice, employee voice, and community voice on the school board to reflect those parent and student needs. So just some general comments around like where we stand right now. And I don't know which form the organizing is going to take in working with the community based on the situation that folks find themselves in. A final comment I wanted to make in particular with Giselle, and I was very excited to listen about the local radio. One of the things I wanted to mention as far as some of the work that I do a podcast called Something Rather Than Nothing. And one of my small projects within this has been to bring about awareness to the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits in North America, in both the United States and Canada, where unsolved cases of missing Native peoples and First Nations, trying to bring awareness, to bring justice and investigations. I've done a 4-part series on that. I mention that in particular because it's tied to safety, the issues historically within the Native communities and those issues. So again, I wanted to thank everybody. I just wanted to kind of give the backdrop in general around school board races, what's going on in schools right now. And I wanted to thank each of you for all your work. And I'm going to stay on the call if you want to kick around some ideas and issues around how to work with schools or what's going on right now, just basic information.
That's great.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. And I see someone asking about contact info in the chat box, so we can get there too. The next person that I would love to have share is Meg Tinnen, also going to share a bit about policing and safety in our communities. Are you here right now to talk about the sweeps and the organizing going on in Jackson County?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Yeah, hi all. So I live in Medford, and you know, back when COVID started, there was kind of just a group of friends, people that were sort of randomly connected, that started doing some outreach to our houseless folks along the Greenway, which is a very long park that runs a little over 20 miles through Jackson County. And it's an area where like historically a lot of houseless folks have camped. It's a pretty wooded area, it's along a creek. And that was the place that our county had designated for people to like shelter in place rather than providing like alternative shelter options for folks during COVID. So we started doing outreach on foot and figuring out what services were actually being provided, what wasn't, figuring out the differences between sort of like the public message that we were getting and what people were actually experiencing on the ground. And then once it became clear that the local police were going to start sweeping people right as the pandemic was really increasing, we kind of like started to organize kind of a strategy around sweep response so that at least we could kind of document what was going on, because the public kind of messaging was that, oh, we're not doing sweeps, we're not doing anything like that. That's not what we're hearing. So our group moved from doing some outreach to doing more kind of documentation of the police interactions with houseless folks and what was really happening there. You know, we made some videos, we posted that stuff online so that folks could see for themselves, like, here's what the police are saying and the county is saying, here's with your own eyes what is actually going on with folks. And, you know, saw the police start to kind of change like their strategy a little bit, like, you know, that maybe weren't expecting to have such like accountability. And so that felt like some good, okay, you know, at least they're responding. They're still doing sweeps, but it's looking different a little bit. They're not going out in the middle of the night as much. So we were still kind of doing that work. And then, you know, the fires hit our community down here extremely hard, and became very clear that the city and the county really were not going to prioritize houseless folks in terms of the fire response. And that people that were previously houseless and impacted by the fires were not, you know, deemed as deserving of services or support during that time. And in fact, in many cases, were being blamed for the fires. And there was some real concern around like safety and response. So, you know, many different people came together at that time to provide some support. There was a mutual aid camp set up in the park that, you know, many folks were involved with, you know, including myself. And that ended up getting raided by the police. And, you know, folks were arrested, and it was pretty, journalist was arrested. So after that period of time, the same, you know, same group of people and also new folks that had like gotten involved during the fires really started to figure out like, what can we do to address the police response to homelessness? We're glad that they've addressed already some changes in their sweep response, but that's when we really started to connect more with like some local attorneys and local, you know, legal advocates. So we've been able to kind of put a little bit of fear, I think, this is my assumption. I think there's a lot of different factors, but I think there's some new fear too, that cities who are just sweeping people, who are just criminalizing homelessness and not offering significant and substantial other resources for folks, are going to end up in a sticky situation because of the Boise ruling that happened, if y'all are familiar with that. And a similar, you know, lawsuit is happening in Grants Pass as well, where the city was found. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Yeah. So, so there's some, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think between some of our response of like showing accountability of the police, showing like we are actually watching what's happening here, we are going to be documenting what you're doing and showing the public the difference between sort of like your public line and what's actually occurring. I think the fires and there's so many people, more people being out on the street has also forced a change in response. And then I think also maybe the threat of legal action. I think, and frankly, just a lot more people like getting involved and getting engaged in this issue in our community. It seems like at least currently things have slowed a little bit in terms of the police doing sweeps on the Greenway. It seems like they're doing some individual targeted stuff at this point, but not anything that's to the level that we were seeing previously in terms of like whole areas just being cleared out, right? And like bulldozers coming in and like all of people's belongings being thrown in a dumpster and that level of displacement. So, you know, on a negative side, you know, our community has not opened any additional warming shelters. We've got more people on the streets than ever between the fires and the housing crisis and COVID. So one thing that we have done in response to that is, well, lots of different things. There's a group that's a really great racial justice organization who's been doing daily feeds in the park to provide food to folks. And then another group of us that are doing like a pop-up warming shelter now. So we've got like a box truck that we have a tent, some propane heaters, and we go out late at night and we do a late night kind of mutual aid setup for folks. And you know, not only try to keep people warm, but also that's just a period of the day when folks are going to be in crisis, you know, and there's nothing open. And, you know, unless you want to deal with the police, which is going to be escalatory for, you know, pretty much anybody in that situation, you don't have a lot of options. So we've been trying to do that. And it's been really cool so far. We've only been out for, we're like going on our 4th week now, where we've been going to different locations and providing those supports. And that's been really great. We're still continuing to watch and try to stay in contact in that regard of what people are saying with the police, so that I suspect that harassment and potential sweeps is probably going to tick up again. So maybe they're laying low for a while, but I don't think we've like solved the issue entirely in Jackson County by any means. So we're still trying to really be in close connection with people and try to figure out how we can respond when that's needed. In terms of what happened in Boise, there was a lawsuit that basically that was the federal judge, who's the same district judge who is over this area as well as Grants Pass, ruled that it's basically cruel and unusual punishment to criminalize somebody for sleeping if you haven't offered them and there's no actual options for them to go somewhere else to sleep, right? And I guess just to comment on that a little bit, a lot of people right now, I think throughout Oregon, jurisdictions are like really confused around what that actually means for them. I think some people are saying, well, if we can create an illusion, and I think in most cases it truly is an illusion, that there's enough shelter spaces and that there's enough beds for people to go to and access, then we can criminalize people if they don't choose those options, right? So some jurisdictions are kind of taking that route. I think maybe there's some jurisdictions that are just trying to kind of lay low on the criminalization and try to just slow the roll a little bit and try to take a step back. I don't think I'm seeing anybody doing like major shifts to their policies. But I just want to throw that out there, that that's happening, that probably these are things that, if you're in, anywhere in the Northwest, probably your city attorneys are aware of that ruling and like could be a leverage point to use, in advocacy. And connecting with like local, Oregon Law Center attorneys or pro bono lawyers might be a good way to like help kind of figure out what flexibility is there. That's my, I'm not an attorney, but that's my knowledge of that. So.
Thanks so much for sharing, Meg. And I see a lot of people going into the chat box and participating and sharing things. And we have 2 more folks to share, and then we're going to open it up for everyone else. So another person who we're really excited is available to share about work against police brutality and all the good work going on in Pendleton and Umatilla County. I want to pass it over to Brianna Spencer, former ROP organizing fellow, to share about some of the amazing work going on over there.
Hi.
Hello.
Good to see you again, Emma and Hannah, and wherever Jess is at on my screen here. So I was asked to speak about things we're doing. So some of my questions were, how are folks in my community, folks I'm close with, reacting to the current moment? In some of the groups, living in Pendleton is a very red part of the state. And it's kind of sketch, to be quite honest, just because, even just yesterday I saw somebody that had a Confederate flag in their car when I was when I was driving by. They were driving by and it was just, they didn't care. So some people are kind of just trying to figure out like what's going to happen, or if something's going to happen. Like we've heard talks of like people, militia groups trying to take over Tri-Cities or do something else. Our biggest stain in Umatilla County is that we allowed a 3%er leader to run for Umatilla County Commissioner, and she didn't lose by that much. So that is that's very alarming to us here. I'm part of a group, one of the groups I'm part of is called the Community and Labor Against Fascism. And so we're working on making like self-defense, being in shape, because we got to learn how to run apparently, and other things. And I think I think that's just kind of it. We're just trying to be cautious and aware of what we're doing in our surroundings and make sure we're ready for what's next. So that's kind of what's happening with what happened in the Capitol. I can say as myself, as a BIPOC person and someone that organized a big march, Black Lives Matter march here in Pendleton. I say I've probably been on alert since like last year. I mean, it's difficult to live in a very red part of the state where a lot of white people are. And so being a person of color and having like the features that I do, I stand out among those other people. You don't really see a lot of people in my town that has curly hair like I do. So it makes you very easily distinguishable. So I'm always on alert for myself because I just never know if someone's gonna come up to me and like either be super happy to see me or really upset to see me, you know, and like the amount of death threats that I get, I'm just kind of like, okay, you know, like it's something you have to live with now once you do that. And that's just part of working here, being within this county. One of the groups that I work with mostly is called the Pendleton Community Action Coalition. And so I'm kind of the lead person in that group. And what I'm wanting to do is make activism be seen as community, as a part of the community. So like the last protest we had a canned food drive that went to the warming station here in Pendleton. And I want to do stuff like that at every protest we have and be there. And we recently organized a free community Christmas dinner. And so we fed over 250 people within the Pendleton and Mission community. And so that was really great. And that's something else I want to just kind of get towards doing more of. So that way when people see us or they see activism, they're not like, we need to fight against this. You know, they're like, this is part of our community. They've been here. They're helping our community in need. They're helping us. Yeah. And so with that, one of the things that we're also working against is police brutality. Our city council just approved a major crimes teams agreement. And so basically it just says that other police agencies can come and investigate other police agencies. And they had a new chief, so that's why we have a new chief now, so that's why they were amending it. It's because of the name change. But I really went to that city council meeting and I asked him, you know, like how do you match with somebody? How are you gonna act if someone has like a gun at you? And the chief was like, I'm gonna pull my gun out because I'm gonna match force with force. And I'm just like, that's how Trayvon Martin died. He was 12 playing with a fake gun in a park and someone pulled up and saw it and shot him, you know? And so legislatively, we can create a police community oversight commission. So that's what I'm kind of working towards too, is because I feel like we need one here in Pendleton. I've never personally been arrested, but I've had friends, you know, that get just randomly stopped after they left a concert and they searched, or people being told, go back to your reservation, you don't belong here, type of things. My mom has told me stories of people like getting beat up before they even got to the jail and like having to follow the police after their friend got arrested to make sure they got to the jail without getting beat up, type of thing, or getting beat up between jail and court type of stuff. And I mean, it's not that my mom's like a little over 50, so it's not like it was that long ago. So with that, sorry, I'm like trying to look at my questions I had here. Hold on 1 second, sorry.
Doing great.
Let's see, the relationship between your protest against brutality and mutual aid. I think I just kind of talked about that. How is using mutual aid to build power relationships in your community so that people are more receptive. So that's just kind of what I'm doing. I'm also, let's see, PCC CLAF. I also do Heal the Land Collective. And so we're part of a group of people that want to do food sovereignty here within the Umatilla County. And as a Native person, I want to make sure that it's done respectively and it's done in a way that, you know, we're making sure that we're reaching out to the right people within the tribes that have inhabited the land, including my tribe, to make sure that we're doing things in a respectful way and listening to, you know, my people that have been stewards of this land for since time immemorial. I'm trying to think if PCAC, CLAP, healing the land. Oh, I guess I'm working with some people in St. Helens, Oregon, to make a protest there. In Valentine's Day, we're going to do a die-in. So that's something to look forward to. Hannah, I'm not sure if they got a hold of you. Maddie got a hold of you. I hope she did.
Organizing while presenting. It's great.
I'm like, oh, good. Okay, we'll chat.
Yeah, we'll chat. Let's see. We're also planning to do a die-in in Tri-Cities because of the school opening. They're trying to open the school in Washington, and we're really against that. So we have a group full of teachers that are within the Washington school district and trying to make sure that they have a safe space to talk, because a lot of them can't really talk without feeling like they're going to lose their job, or getting ratted out by somebody else. So we're creating that safe space for them, and making sure that they can talk and tell about things that, that would normally get them fired, and trying to use that info without giving away that a teacher gave it to us to plan our die-in there. I'm kind of just all over the place. I have a group full of Washington, Oregon organizers that I'm with. So I work with people from Granite Falls, Snohomish County, Spokane, Tri-Cities, all the way here. We're also planning a Women X March that's going to be happening in a March 7th, I think. So it's 6 weeks apart. Stuff like that. But we're all, with all of these organizers that we're with, we're all focused on the kind of the same thing of making activism part of our community. So we want people on the city council, we want people on the school boards, we want people talking to administrators, everything else like that, so they have that voice there. A really great idea one of the other organizers came up with was they met with a school administrator, and they said, look, I want to have these books about race in your school. You don't have to teach about them. I just want them in the school so people can access them, so people that want to learn about this have a safe space to do it. And instead of being like their parents looking over their shoulder, just put it in the library. And the best thing was, he's like, I crowdfunded it, and the books are there now. No cost, kids get to learn, do all that thing. So I was like, this is awesome. This is so, we need to talk. And so it's just been really great to have that that group chat that I have with those people, and people that understand. And one of the organizers, he was the cousin of Kevin Peterson Jr. that got shot in Vancouver, Washington, and that was very surreal for us, because we hear about Black deaths all the time, but to have an organizer that we worked with for months experience that in their family was a lot. And we held a candlelight vigil for them here. We've checked up on them just to make sure, see if the family needs anything or we can do anything. So that's also, I guess, mutual taking care of each other as well. The group chat that we have is definitely for us to vent about things that lead organizers might not be able to tell other people within their group, because everyone needs time. I'm constantly busy, but even I was like, I'm taking a week off. I don't exist to anybody. Y'all are on your own. And they're like, okay. So yeah, I think that's it. I'm sorry if I blabbed on a lot. If anyone has any questions, you can let me know. Sorry, and do know I talk very fast too, so I apologize for that as well.
Doing great. Thanks for sharing all those different pieces and projects that are rolling in your area. And it's really incredible how many different projects you have rolling all at once.
I know, I'm sorry. I don't realize it until I say it out loud that I'm like, oh yeah, and then there's this and this, and I'm like, oh, okay. But it's awesome. I love it.
That's great. So last but not least, and then we're going to open it up to discussion. So get your questions ready, get your comments and all the things. We got Chuck Willer, who is working on a project that combines and tackles the enormous issues of both the economic catastrophe we're living through and climate change. I know a lot of folks are talking about this in their community, seeing the impacts. So really excited to kick it over to Chuck.
Well, thank you, Emma. Gosh, I'm in awe at everyone's stories here. My life is so much more boring, and I would have to say safe and privileged as I sit in Corvallis here and basically work on my computer I am not confronting, on the street racist and authoritarian police, etc. So I tip my hat to everybody here. I work for the Coast Range Association. I have about 25 years expertise in industrial corporate forestry, which for the most part covers Western Oregon and sets a lot of the tone in the rural landscape for economics and politics. And a bit ago, we became very alert to the situation with the climate. We took the 11,000 member scientist letter headed by Bill Ripple out of OSU, given the second warning to humanity that we're facing catastrophe. We took that seriously. We took Earl Blumenauer's leadership in Congress with a House resolution declaring a climate emergency seriously. And if you look at the data in the most cursory way, we're in a climate emergency, and future prospects, particularly for my grandchildren, are quite bleak. So we looked at some of the literature about what can Oregon do. And in particular, we paid attention to the Green New Deal. House Resolution 109 is introduced by Ocasio-Cortez and Markey out of Massachusetts, and read it carefully. And then we decided to say, we said to ourselves, okay, here's House Resolution 109. It sets up a framework for a Green New Deal that would transform the country away from fossil fuels. But most importantly, it had a strong social justice component that was lacking in everything else we read about solving climate issues. And so we looked at that document, and then we asked ourselves, well, how would it apply to Western Oregon, the forests that could contribute the most to sequestering atmospheric carbon? And you got to remember that Ocasio-Cortez on one occasion early on said, this is a framework, we're looking for proposals. And at that point we said, well, let's see how it applies in Western Oregon, and let's come up with a proposal. Well, after much work, today we rolled out our proposal, and it's available. And I'll just give you the short version. I'm putting a link here in the chat. You can go to coastrange.org, and there's the link. Download the document. It's really fun reading. It's only 59 pages. And that's our proposal. The short of it is that we lay out that we're in a climate emergency, and we've had conversations with our conservation colleagues. Coast Range mostly works with the conservation community, and no one was scaling to what the scientists were saying is the crisis. They were not offering proposals that were appropriate to the emergency we're in. It's like showing up to an auto wreck and you're an EMT and people are talking about an ACE bandage or putting some Band-Aids on when you need to get that person to the emergency room in the next 30 minutes. So that was our sense. So we said, let's give it a go. And a lot of what we had to process on was information about the nature of who owns the forest that could sequester most carbon in Western Oregon, and that is the corporate owners, the industrial landscape, the lands that are run to grow money and not grow trees or forests, because they're financially controlled by Wall Street interest. And so we lay out in our section 3 of the document a fairly, I think, solid indictment of that cohort of firms that dominate our landscape. And we came up with some new information. I don't know if anyone here saw prior work in the past 3 years where we, I traveled around talking about the tax avoidance by the timber industry, some new mapping of ownership, and the loss of production because of financial management. Rotation lengths sacrificed 20 to 50% of what you could grow in saw timber off the landscape. These are facts that are not talked about. But in our new analysis, we came up with some new information, such as the fact that as much as 750,000 acres of small ownership has been absorbed and taken over by the Wall Street industrials since the 1960s in Western Oregon. And when you take away, how many small families leave rural valleys and leave the rural landscape for every 10,000 acres of small ownership that's absorbed by Wall Street? So this is one piece of information we explore. Obviously, the main thrust is to grow the forest larger than their little tiny plantation structure and build up carbon on the landscape similar to eras long ago. To do that, though, you either have to lay off a lot of the workforce and keep the investors whole, or if you want to grow the forest larger, you have to cut back on production. So we came up with that. We had to choose between the forest and carbon, workers and communities, and Wall Street and capital. Well, if anyone knows me, you know how we chose. We're going with the forest and carbon, communities and people, and it's just there's no place for Wall Street and their financial management of forests if we're going to build the forests up for carbon sequestration. So we lay that all out in our proposal. We explained our logic and rationale. We ground it in the Green New Deal framing. And so our solution is a 10, 20-year investment, and the Rural Organizing Project Roadmap, center section, invest in rural lands, rural landscapes, rural communities. Yeah, there would need to be about $100 million a year investment in the rural landscape to buy out corporate Wall Street ownership and reset it on social benefit owners, companies. And then we had said, well, who will then get these lands? The first thought we got from some of our colleagues was, nationalize the private lands. And we said, no, I don't think that's going to fly. We got plenty of federal land. 50% of the forest in Oregon is federal. What we looked around and right away, what did we notice is unique about rural Oregon and rural America? The legacy of the New Deal has left all kinds of enterprise and firms that deliver electricity, telephone, and internet. Because in the 30s, capitalist owners wouldn't invest in rural America because they couldn't make a buck. Roosevelt then funded all these co-op operations across the United States, and rural people are actually very familiar with social benefit enterprise. Whereas you talk to someone in Portland, they've never heard of it. And so what we're calling for is a long-term buyout of the industrial lands would be attached a working forest conservation easement that would grow carbon and grow the forest and actually recover productivity that's now lost because of financial management, owned by local nonprofit organizations similar to the electric co-ops. And the conservation easement that's attached to the title of every parcel would sideboard, because one of the first things I hear from my colleagues is, you want to give the lands over to the locals. Well, the locals have been running the electric co-ops pretty damn well for 60 years, 70 years. And if you have a conservation easement for the purpose and dedicated to carbon buildup for saw timber production, I don't think they're going to go wrong. And I would trust in local communities to then, within that framework, manage right. And I'll just close by saying our proposal, I was on a call, I think late summer, of conservation colleagues where the question was posed, well, how do we answer timber unity? What's their economic message? How do we deal with that? And I mean, I was on a call with 15 people who are smart and well paid. And there was crickets. No one had anything to say because all they do is owls and wildlife and that kind of stuff. They have very little understanding of political economy, power, capitalism, and the whole mess that colonizes our landscape. That's really when I said, okay, we've just got to lay it out. We've been working on this for 20 years. And so our proposal, I see it as a direct response to timber unity, because how do they answer to the loss of all those small holdings? How do they answer to the fact they're in bed with the massive export of cash to equity owners of these lands? And I'll just end by also saying that who owns the equity of Weyerhaeuser, the stock of Weyerhaeuser and these TIMO investor groups? 90% of American equity is owned by the richest 10% of households, and 60% of US equity is owned by the 1%. So when you look out across the blown out landscape of Western Oregon's industrial forest, just know that's all going to either the top 10% or the top 1% every year in terms of profit and the export of value. I end.
Thank you, Chuck.
There's the link. You can download the report, and I would urge a careful read because it's not a simple subject. It's a lot of moving parts, but I think this is one of the first authentic responses to Ocasio-Cortez for a proposal from a grassroots region. We're not connected to anyone. We did this all in our internal little world.
Question for Chuck?
Amazing. Yeah, go for it, Linda. I do want to just point out that we want to make sure we have plenty of time for conversation, open-ended conversation. We have about a little less than 15 minutes left, so go for it, but we'll keep it brief so we can open it up.
So what's the plan for going forward with this awesome sounding report, Chuck?
Well, we've got to get it on the desk of key congressional leaders that are working on the Green New Deal, as Biden says, framework. And we've got to bring it to their attention. We also have to reach out to Eastern forest activists that all have their own Green New Deal agenda, although I have not seen any proposals. And we have to sell it hard to the Oregon delegation, Merkley, Blumenauer, Bonamici, and DeFazio in particular, since he'll now chair the infrastructure committee, which will be a lot of money. But we also have to get it out to US and international leaders in climate thinking, the Sunrise Movement leadership, 350 leadership, and others who have an understanding of the dynamics of capitalism within the climate crisis and the climate emergency.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Chuck. And thanks to everyone who took time to share the strategies and the pieces that y'all are moving. I am already clicking away on so many things, and I can tell from the way the chat box is popping off that others are too. It's really exciting. Well, so in our last few minutes here, I want to open it up. What are you all chewing on? Like, what did this raise for you? What are you seeing in your communities that maybe hasn't got named that you feel like really needs to be named around what's happening for you in this political moment locally? I will again encourage folks maybe to just keep your responses pretty brief to like a minute or so that we can try to hear from multiple folks before we have to move to close.
like to talk about an action that we could hopefully all perform regarding removing Mike Neerman from the legislature. I think that everybody probably understands what Mike Neerman did on the 21st of December. He opened the door to violent protesters and let them into the building, putting everybody in the building in danger. So as I see it, the next step to go forward is for everyone to write to the entire conduct committee of the legislature, because they are the ones that will see this next, and ask them to please remove him from the legislature. And I will put in the chat the emails for the conduct committee and how to find, also to write to your own House legislator. I'll put the how to find your legislator in the chat, and a link to an article if you don't know anything about this.
I'm so glad you raised that. Thank you, Linda.
I'd love to ask for some suggestions if I could. My
Please.
name is Nicole Selinger. I live in Grants Pass, Oregon, which is fairly conservative area. And we have an interesting mix of folk here, but it includes a growing number of liberal-ish, white middle class people who want to do good and are wanting to kind of plug in, as well as some conservative, and I don't mean to be drawing political lines around here, but I'm just trying to give a flavor of what we're experiencing here, who are really wanting to understand more and sort of starting from scratch, like, whoa, oh, something's happening. What shall I do? How can I learn more? Who do I talk to? And so I'm wondering, in that context of a maybe not, I think we're about 90% white community that is a little bit behind the times. But there's this opening, it feels like, where people are wanting to either get even more active than they've ever been, or wanting to even start getting active but don't know where to start. Where you've seen growing a movement in that kind of context.
I want to open that question up to the whole crew. Other folks, feel free to respond.
Speak to that a little bit. Oh, this is Brianna. Having like, we had a Stop the Fascist Power Grab in recently, like last weekend, and we had a lot of people come out for it that were white and liberal and kind of conservative. So maybe like opening up with something like that, that's still part of the movement and probably not as, like, you know, not as liberal as you want it to be, you know, but it helps. Some people are just like, I don't know where to start. And then once they get out there and they're like, oh my gosh, this felt amazing. And then they want to do more type of things. It is very hard. Like I said, I live in Pendleton. We have a very, very, very small population of BIPOC people. Most people on my PCAC coalition are there's only like two. There's me and my other organizer, Adam, and we're the only BIPOC people on there. Unfortunately, gratefully, Adam's the only guy, so it's mostly women, so that's great. But yeah, I think just starting out with that, something that is opening the door for them and leading to more things. And then with that, you also find out who's there to just like kind of want to be there for holding up a sign, or who's there for like the long haul, want to do stuff for you as far as like sit-ins or, you know, stuff like that.
Thanks, Brianna.
We have time for one more either response to Nicole, or if somebody else wants to throw in something else. And I know that there's so many more things that we're not able to get to on this call. So I want to encourage y'all to start throwing stuff in the chat box too. If you're like, this is what we're working on, this is what we're seeing, and you didn't get to speak it out to the group, please throw it in there, and other folks will be able to start seeing it, and we'll be able to capture it in that way also. One more person to see us out before we move to close.
I have a quick question.
Go for it.
I was just wondering, considering we're all across the state, if there are any coalitions that are building, if we could just get like a quick shout out, and then if they're in our area, we can become more aware of them.
I love that idea. If folks have coalitions, you want to throw them in the chat box, and we can be sure to include them in the follow-up email. And I want to also just say too, in terms of thinking about coalition space, like these strategy session spaces are meant to continue to be meeting spaces for y'all to gather and be building coalition and figuring out other ways we might want to be working together around some of this stuff. So also know that these spaces will continue as well in that way.
I would love to do a really quick 30-second or less sort of plug, not for my own program, but just for this idea of coalition building. I think a lot of people going into the Biden administration, whether it's us or people around us, are very excited about this return to normalcy and maybe some nostalgia for the Obama years. But I think that something that has come to mind is the idea that normalcy for us, or some of us back then, was not normal for everybody and not livable for everybody. So all the people that have been coming out, and that includes, liberals, progressive, leftists, anarchists, socialists, communists, whatever, in your area, building coalitions with those people to improve the community life is really important. And we have so much work to do, and we need to work together to do it. So that was my little thing.
Perfect. Thanks, Allison. Awesome. Oh my goodness, yeah, so much. And I know that there's so much more to say. And please do know we've got more strategy sessions coming up soon. We're going to be announcing dates coming up. And I'll kick it to Jess to share, a little bit more about that as we close out. But just know this is a continuation of spaces that we've been holding and will continue holding. So thanks so much, y'all. All right, Jess, I'll let you bring us home.
All right. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jess, and I'm ROP's director and also an organizer. I'm based out of here in Cottage Grove. It's so good to see y'all, see so many faces, and also see some new faces. So grateful for everyone sharing all your thinking, heart, and brilliance tonight. And I would love to end it by, if you have a minute and you can drop something into the chat box that you're taking away from this strategy session, that would be so helpful for us as ROP organizers who are trying to facilitate these spaces as folks are asking for it. So if you could toss in here one thing you're taking away, that would be real helpful. In the meantime, while you all are typing that in, we just want to plug again. We as a network, as a statewide network of more than 80 groups that are autonomous across the state, that are, made up of groups that are experts in their communities, all organizing for justice, human dignity, and democracy. The role of ROP and ROP staff is to support you, and we take direction from what you're doing. It is the best job in the world, getting to have you all tell us what we're supposed to be prioritizing and working on. And that said, we're also really available to help strategize, to help problem solve, always just a phone call away, especially in this moment where everyone's so freaked out about violence in so many different communities. We have a lot of years of experience, many of it lived years of experience for some of us, as well as lessons from a great number of leaders across the network, and we're happy to strategize with you in those moments. I'm wondering if there's another staff member who's been watching the beautiful stuff kind of scrolling through the chat box and would like to highlight a couple.
Yes. I want to say, Catherine saying fabulous information, so that I'm glad I didn't miss the presenters, learned and got inspired. Will this recording be accessible in the future? Yes, it will. We're recording it and we're sharing it back with you all.
We got Edie saying, can I jump in? Edie said, my takeaway is, I wish I had enough time and resources to take part in all of the great projects. And that's the great part about being part of a network. You don't have to do everything. You can just pick one and work on it, and it's all connected.
Mike Edera says, such great local organizing. Is it time to create a central political action organization where each local group can throw in to focus political power on agreed upon common targets?
Ooh la la.
That's exciting, right? Jennifer says, takeaway, activism never sleeps. Karen saying, joyful connection. And Brianna saying, empowerment, that there are so many others that are doing this amazing work.
And I also see some compliments for Rural Roots Rising. Thank you all so much for that. That is really wonderful to hear. So thank you so much for so much that you have all shared tonight, and we're looking forward to being in relationship and digging in further in your work. If you are in a space where you want to support all the work that's happening here, you can donate at rop.org/donate. We do all of this work for free and make it accessible because we believe this kind of space should be available to everyone regardless. I also want to put out a pitch that we are looking for our next rural organizers to join our staff team. And so if you know someone who's ready to jump into work at ROP to join the dream team, we would love to meet them. We would love to read their application. You can read more at rop.org/careers. For those of you who were asking, yes, we will absolutely send out a recording, and we've also been collecting the links in the chat, and we will be sharing that all out in a follow-up email in the next day or two, maybe Monday, if depending on how this weekend goes. Also know that you can find video recordings of prior strategy sessions at rop.org/strategy session. And that includes strategy sessions around a number of issues that were brought up here tonight. All right, well, the last thing I have is we were asked by badass organizers out of Josephine County, out of the Illinois Valley, to share a little pitch that they have an Out Dance Project, which is a rural queer story gathering and dance project. And they are looking for stories from rural queer and trans folks in Oregon about a song that has played a role in your life. We will include the link if you feel so compelled or you know someone who's so compelled to contribute to this really powerful, creative opportunity in a land and a time of social distancing, but still prioritizing live performance and dance. We would love for you all to participate, and we love that Elliot and Sophia asked us to share it. With all that said and done, we are so grateful for you all being on tonight. We know it's been an incredibly rough week. It's been a rough 4 years. It's been a rough, long run for a lot of us and for a lot of y'all. We're really grateful to be in community with you all. So thank you all so much for showing up tonight, and looking forward to chatting with you all very, very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Goodbye. So good to see you.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye,
Good night.
everybody.
Bye,
Good to
everybody.
see your faces.
Everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.